Well, I've been doing something that I haven't done much of, which is to talk about my experience as a cancer patient. And it's been SALT Study Day today, and that's a gathering of lots of professionals, medical professionals, nurses, doctors, surgeons, that kind of thing, brought together under one roof to look at advances and so on in their trade. And what was difficult for me in a way is getting across perhaps the emotional side of being a patient. I mean, these are people who know everything there is to know about the technical side of being a cancer patient, especially those who have to go through what I've had to do with bowel cancer and having a stoma, that kind of thing. But it's the emotional side of it, the practical side of it, I suppose, about what happens when you get home. You know, the weird thing about a bowel cancer journey is you don't really know the beginning and you don't really know the end. So I know the day I was diagnosed with bowel cancer, but I don't know when it started, because I was at the top of my game. I was having a fantastic time at work, at home, really enjoying myself. And then suddenly just noticed a couple of symptoms, which I wasn't sure about, went to see my GP, and you know, that led on to a specialist and so on, and finally a colonoscopy, and suddenly you hear those words, "I'm sorry to have to tell you, Mr. Alagiah, you've got bowel cancer." And it is a shock, because it runs counter to anything you're feeling inside you. In fact, I used to, in the days after my cancer was diagnosed, I'd lie in bed, very still, very quiet, and try to listen to my body. I'd almost say to my body, "Tell me where you're hurting," because I didn't know. And that's why I think, I mean, everybody talks about a diagnosis with cancer being a shock, but it's because it's something that creeps up on you silently. And that was certainly the case with me. Once I got diagnosed, I had some brilliant doctors. I went through lots of treatment, you know, chemo, very heavy chemo to start with, 2 liver operations, then a break, then an operation on my gut, on my bowel, and then more chemo after that. You know, I became an expert of going in and out of hospitals. And the thing you learn about that, of course, is you learn about yourself, about where your limits are, you learn about what you need, you learn to ask for what you need, which is not an easy thing to do, I think, to say, do you know what, I need help. After my operation on the gut, I ended up with what's called an ileostomy bag, and that's when you leave hospital and you've got a bag here attached to you, and basically your waste is going into that. And it requires, technically, the nurses, the kind of nurses who were at the SALT Study Day, know all about it. Technically, they can show you how it works, they can show you how it fits on. What they can't tell you about, and I hope today was useful for them, they can't tell you about what it feels like to be the person who wears one. In my case, it was a big, well, I wouldn't call it identity crisis, but I had been this guy, you know, the go anywhere, anytime BBC correspondent. Suddenly I couldn't go anywhere without this little blue bag, because I had my spare ileostomy bags in it and my wipes and so on. So that was quite a journey. Well, with my family, clearly, I mean, it goes without saying, it was a shock, but you suddenly realize what family is about, actually, because literally within minutes of me phoning my wife, she was in a taxi coming to see me. She told my sisters. We all got together that evening, and we spent as much time laughing as we were crying. It was one of those kind of edgy sort of evenings. But I knew then that they were going to be my core support group. With the wider community, it's interesting, because I think still, despite the fact that something like 1 in 2, 1 in 3 people are going to get cancer, I think there's still a bit of hesitancy about how to deal with it, how to talk about it. And I know that was certainly the case with some of my friends who would just bombard me with questions. And the ones, I suppose, who got it were the ones who just came and gave me a hug and said, "Look, I'm here." And literally were the ones who, as I proceeded through this, you know, went on walks with me, attended hospital appointments with me, cooked for us, did all kinds of things. And you realize that you've got friends, but suddenly you've got a community, and there is a difference between those two things, actually. And dare I say it, I feel richer for being part of that community now. I wouldn't have experienced it. I mean, I'm not saying, I wish I hadn't had cancer, obviously, but I have cancer, and I'm glad of the things I've learned about myself and about my community, my friends and my family as a result. Just over 5 years ago, I sat there in a hospital room and a doctor said to me, "You have advanced bowel cancer." Now, technically it's called stage 4. What it means in reality is, if you've got anything to sort out, mate, do it now. Okay, that's how serious my cancer was. And I'm not going to look back and blame myself, but the truth of the matter is there had been some symptoms that I'd ignored, and truthfully I didn't know about those symptoms. Had people talked about it, had there been more publicity about being aware of bowel cancer and its symptoms, then I might not be in the stage I am now, which is 5 years into treatment. I keep having to go back and getting more treatment. So the really key thing is listening to your body, going off and getting advice anytime there is a symptom. If you've got different bowel motions, bowel habits, if you're losing weight, both of which, by the way, I had, but I kind of disregarded because I didn't know how important they could be. And this is one of those cases where, people say ignorance is bliss. Well, it definitely is not. It's better to know, and it's better to know early. If you find out early that you've got a diagnosis of bowel cancer, your doctors have a pretty good chance of helping you out. Survival rates in Europe are better than they are in Britain, and that's not because our doctors are lazy, our nurses are not dedicated or good. It's because by and large here in Britain, and it's to do with the P word, the poo word, people don't like talking about bowel cancer, and by the time they turn up to their doctors, like me, you're pretty far gone, and then it's a much more challenging job getting people back to a healthy state. Looking back at the last, 5 odd years, the one thing, I suppose, above anything else that I wish had been different is that I had been diagnosed earlier. I'm not full of regrets because I am where I am. I am a cancer patient. I'm living with cancer. But had there been earlier screening in England, it's different in Scotland, by the way, but had there been earlier screening in England at 50, which is what it's like in Scotland and in Europe, I might have been tested about 3 times. And my cancer might have been caught so much earlier. And if my cancer had been caught earlier, you know what? I might not have had to go through, dozens of rounds of chemo, 4 or 5 major operations. That's what I've had to put up with. And I admire the people who got me through all of that. But a lot of it could have been saved if only there'd been earlier screening.